Ladies and gentlemen, how about a warm welcome for B2B Reimagined?
Hello, everyone. My name is Barrett Thompson. I'm the Vice President of Customer and Industry Relations at Zilliant and the host of B2B Reimagined. We're excited to have you with us today for our first ever live podcast episode recorded on stage here at Zilliant MindShare 2024. For those who are unfamiliar, we have 83 episodes of our podcast available for you to listen to on our website, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. We bring on thought leaders from our customers, from partners, from industry to help us explore their perspective on driving commercial excellence in B2B. And it's my privilege this afternoon to be joined by Rob Pedigo from Dawn Foods, Lydia DiLiello from Capital Pricing Consultants, and Beshir from Accenture. Welcome to B2B Reimagined.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, before we get started with our topic, I'd like you to indulge me. I want to do a lightning round icebreaker. And so the question is, what is your favorite cartoon character and why? All right, Rob, I think we'll start with you. Favorite cartoon character and why?
I'm going to go with Astro from the Jetsons. Two simple reasons. Space, dog.
All right, there we go for Astro. It's a good one. Lydia.
I'm going to go with the Tasmanian Devil because even though sometimes he makes a mess, he always gets the job done.
Okay, Mo, how about you?
Well, for me, Barrett, I had to research because I wanted to check if my character made it to the top 10 of value generation over their life cycle.
I'm not surprised.
They're in number 4. And you, as you see my body, you can see I've adopted the character ways of eating. And I eat a lot of honey, so I go with Winnie the Pooh.
Winnie the Pooh. That's a great choice.
So generated 50 billion during their lifetime.
Wow. It's quite a brand, quite a legacy. All right, thank you for sharing that. Let's take a moment and I'd ask each of you to share your company, your role, and how you help your clients. And maybe we'll go in reverse order with you first, Mo.
Sure. So I'm a managing director in Accenture. I lead the global quote-to-cash practice, part of strategy. So I bring in strategy and consulting as well as technology to help our customer from driving the vision all the way to implementing it end-to-end.
Very good. Lydia.
So I'm the CEO and founder of Capital Pricing Consultants, and it's a revenue management consultancy focused really on helping customers increase revenue and profitability sustainably.
Thank you. Rob.
I'm Rob Pedigo. I'm the Senior Director of Pricing Strategy for Dawn Foods. We are a bakery supply company. We manufacture goods and we distribute our goods as well as others to make a complete basket for our customers.
Thank you, Rob. All right, in line with the key themes that we've been discussing here at MindShare, the topic I would like to explore with you three is the theme of pricing transformation in the context of great pressures that are on business today, as well as the great opportunities that are in front of us. And I thought we would begin. Rob, you have recently been at the lead of a pricing transformation in your own company. So I wonder if you would take a moment and explain that to us, maybe from both a process perspective and a technology perspective. How have you approached the problem? What results have you seen? And where are you on the journey?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we actually are coming from a Wild West situation where there's just a lot of running and gunning with prices out in the field. There were some guidelines on how to price certain products, but not quite enough to create consistency in our pricing schemes. So what we did is we took the technology first approach and went straight from the Wild West to putting in the Price IQ, price optimization solution. Now, in terms of process with that, since that is a significant change in and of itself, we tried not to do a lot with process. We created the pathway to get the guidance to our sellers and coach them a little bit on the types of price actions we'd like to see them executing with this tool, and some negotiating strategies to help guide prices in the direction that's necessary. And it's not always price up. We were trying to get to a point where we had reasonable, rational prices in the market for our customers that would be fair to them.
Rob, when you think about where you would ultimately like to be and compare that to where you started from, what percentage through that journey do you believe you're at currently?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and at our company, it depends on who you ask.
Okay, yeah.
If you talk to some folks, they would say, well, since we've already put in price IQ, we're done.
Right.
We're optimized. Not quite. I don't believe that there really is an end to the pricing journey. I would say that even though we've implemented price optimizations, we still have a great deal of room for improvement and some really exciting things to do with our pricing for our customers.
Makes sense. Now, Lydia and Mo, you've both worked with customers of many sizes, many industries on their pricing transformation. So I'd like to give you an opportunity, hearing what Rob just described, what comes to mind for you? Is his path unique, or is it common? Or are there any other things that you think are noteworthy you'd want to call out about the journey that he just described based on your experiences? Lydia?
So I think that the path that Rob, you chose makes a tremendous sense, because you put in guidelines to support the guidance that you were giving to your sales force. And that's critical. And I think it's a step that a lot of companies don't always want to take, because what they think is that you set 2 or 3 guidelines and that covers it. And we all know that governance and grants of authority can be painstaking, and getting it right and really being willing to iterate on that to make sure that, because prices, to your point, are going to go 2 directions if we're really doing this engaged and thoughtfully, because we've all got price points out there that I hate to say are too high. So how we manage that to get down to something that is the most profitable for our business, where we get the highest number of sales, is critical.
And from my side, I agree with Rob. Pricing is not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's a lifetime. It's a journey that we all embark on. And we see a lot of customers going into that journey and evolving with it throughout the years. So it doesn't matter where you start. Like you mentioned, you started with the technology part, and you started building the guardrail using technology. And it's a great way. Sometimes using technology helps drive change management. Some other clients will go and do the process first and then enable the technology on top. So we've seen both ways, and there is no one way fits everybody. It's what fits each customer in their context, in their point in time.
Mm-hmm. So there are multiple ways to be successful on that journey. That's what I'm hearing from you, Mo.
Yep.
I'm curious to know, when I think about a business that maybe has been running pricing the same way for decades and highly successful, or they wouldn't still be in business, so there's something to what they're doing. I'm curious to know your point of view on what motivates such a business to really undertake a pricing transformation, right? That feels like a lot of activity and maybe is perceived as a lot of risk. So what are the things that are driving that? Rob, I wonder if you would share from perspective of Dawn Foods, what first motivated that transformation for you? And then Lydia and Mo, you could share also what you have seen as typical drivers.
If you don't mind, this is actually the 3rd pricing transformation that I've been involved with, and each has kind of had its own genesis. The first company that I was working on a pricing transformation for was responding to forthcoming changes in the competitive landscape. They knew there would be opportunity, but we couldn't approach pricing the same way that we had since the company's inception. It just wouldn't work. So I led that effort. The second company, there was a government mandate within parts of telecommunications to change the way the companies were compensating one another. So I led changes not just within my company, but also within the industry and with regulators to drive that change. And for Dawn, I wasn't with the company yet when they decided to pursue price optimization. So I can't see exactly what their inspiration was, but I believe it had to do a lot with understanding that their prices were kind of all over the place, and especially as you get out at the long end of the product tail, they didn't have as much consistent data to work with to price those effectively.
Mo, what have you seen as some of the common drivers for a pricing transformation?
One of the facts that we all know, if we keep doing the same thing, we'll get the same results. So today, as we all know, pricing should be improving margins across the globe. We're seeing, for example, the pressures, the macroeconomic pressure coming into every company. If they keep doing what they're doing with the macroeconomic pressure, the margin will erode. And if we do not do something about it, it will shrink, the share price will go down, and it will become a downward spinning problem. So what we do is we always go to clients and say, let me take your data. Let me look at what we can do together on optimizing and improving your margin. There are lots of customers who have been very profitable in the past. But then when we look at the data, we show them, look at the number of products sold in negative margin.
Yes.
You did not know about those products sold in negative margin. Now, there are reasons when we cannibalize one product to sell other products that are more significant in margin so that overall the margin improves. But if there is none of the cannibalization and I'm just losing money because I don't know, or the sales reps are selling without having a control over their selling price,
right,
there is a lot we can do together.
Lydia, what have you seen with the clients that you've helped?
I often see, Mo, to your point, I think you catch it maybe before. I often see it, clients will contact me once they start to bleed. If it's business as usual that they've done for years and years and been very successful, all of a sudden Q1 doesn't look so hot, Q2 margin deteriorated further, Q3 everybody's hair's on fire, and then we start calling to get help because clearly something's gone very wrong. And I see that in companies of all sizes, a Fortune 500 who was discounting in-house 3 times before anything went out the door to the customer because they didn't trust their data. They had a data lake that I called a data swamp, and nobody trusted it, and so they just discounted because they were trying to win business, and nobody was doing anything wrong. But when the COO saw that, now it shines a bright light. So it's an event or it's a continuous progression of bleeding that causes them to say, oh, we've got to do something very different than we've been doing.
I think it was Warren Buffett who quipped, when the tide goes out, you see who's swimming naked, right? So when the tide changes, the tide of business, the tide of profitability, then people realize that they're exposed, and they want to take care of it. Are there any other organic drivers, for example, M&A activity, or something, some other kind of indicator, you reach a certain size on the sales team, or you reach a certain number of SKUs in the catalog that can trigger the necessity to get serious about a pricing transformation? Or maybe another IT initiative that's going on inside the company, which creates an opportunity to put pricing transformation along with it. Mo?
So today, every customer is going through S4HANA and upgrading it and moving into the ERP. What we are advising our customers is that to look at your pricing, even if you're just going into your S4HANA. Because if I simplify your pricing point, if I can keep optimizing your pricing while reducing the complexity, it will even simplify your S4HANA implementation. Mm-hmm. I've seen a lot of customers driving the pricing initiative because either their solution, their existing solution that they built potentially on their own, or used other solutions that are running out of warranty, and that's could trigger their decision to look outside. What else is there? So on the IT side, there is definitely a lot of reasons behind that, but also on the business, to your point. I want to be an acquisition target, and I want to make my price point exciting for the investors, that when they look at our books, we are in a healthy business.
Makes sense. Lydia or Rob, any other triggers in the business itself?
So I think with the mergers and acquisitions, the other thing that happens is, in addition to being interesting to a potential buyer, is because all of that information is being reviewed, suddenly the impact of where we really are versus where we've been year over year, everything gets uncovered, because by the nature of M&A, right, you have to. And so it shines a bright light on it, and now because it's exposed, there's an opportunity to go do something about it.
And if you are looking to be acquired, and I'm not saying anything if my Dawn people are listening.
Legal disclaimer, right?
Yeah, I don't want to alarm anybody, but if you are looking to be acquired and you show you've increased the value of your company and you become more efficient, that could increase your asking price.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it certainly makes sense. As we talk with pricing leaders, one of the laments that we hear is that they may feel that they lack influence enough to inside their organization to even get a pricing transformation on the agenda, right? The corporate agenda is full with many things. At Zilliant, it's our goal to put pricing at the heart of the business. And so I wonder, among the three of you, can you think of some ways that pricing leaders here, or Zilliant ourselves, could do a better job to achieve that goal of getting pricing on the agenda? Lydia?
So the first thing I think is as practitioners, we need to get the numbers in front of our executive leadership teams, and we need to get them in a really tight format that's consumable. I certainly was guilty of this as a practitioner. I'd come in with 4 reams of paper because it was so important to me, every bit of it, except that the CEO really only wanted to see 5 or 6 metrics. And if I could show those 5 or 6 metrics over the past 3 years, it became very impactful and really helped me move an initiative forward. So I would say identify those and then partner with Zilliant or to get help in how are you going to show this in a meaningful way, right, to your leadership, and tell that story, because you're going to need some help in lifting this.
Rob, what about your experience? You mentioned several companies where you've been at the lead, so how did you find a way to get the pricing transformation up on the corporate agenda and receiving attention and resources?
To Lydia's point, the numbers are critical.
Okay.
The context is also important. And when you can tell the story with the numbers, this is where we are, this is why we think we are where we are. If we make these tweaks, we think this is where we can be. And you can do it concisely. And as you're talking to leaders from different parts of the company, say sales, marketing, procurement, they're all going to have their own interests and expectations about how we can improve. So if you craft the story each time you talk to them to address what their needs are and how pricing transformation could help meet them, it becomes much more palpable for them. And it helps grease the skids for acceptance.
I think there's real wisdom in that, Rob, right? Seek out an ally by aligning with their interests and showing them how the pricing initiative is going to serve their interests. I think that's really smart. Mo?
I have a quote for you, Barrett.
I would love it.
And I had to research it from my Winnie the Pooh, because he apparently was very smart pricing guy. So Winnie the Pooh says, and I remind everybody here in this room, you're braver than you believe, you're stronger than you seem, and you're smarter than you think. If we keep that in our mind, for all of us, we can bring the value what we want to achieve. And I could not agree more with what Rob and Lydia said. But I just want to say, let's remember the quote from Winnie the Pooh, because there is a lot we can do.
So pricing according to Pooh.
There
we go. That's great. That's great. Well, let me also ask, in that context, you know, a pricing transformation is rarely, if ever, the only transformation that's going on inside of a company. So what are your thoughts on how you navigate competing initiatives that may be happening, initiatives that are getting attention that you want the pricing initiative to receive? We hear often about resource constraints and finite dollars and finite even attention from leadership. How do you put pricing in the spotlight? Mo, let me start with you.
Sure. I always start with a business case. What is the business case for all the initiative we're running? Someone said it earlier today. Pricing has always the highest return on investment. So, as Lydia said, presenting the vision, presenting the return on investment from the business case compared to the other initiatives usually helps me when I was a pricing person or when I advise my client on why we should prioritize pricing initiative before anything else. Or get pricing to cover the cost of all the other initiatives. But you start with pricing.
And we heard that fact, Patrick was mentioning that from Future earlier today, didn't he?
Yeah.
That the pricing initiative had covered the cost of all of the other IT initiatives that were ongoing. I thought that was really impactful. Yes. Lydia, what have you seen?
So as a follow-on, Mo, I agree with you totally in terms of if you put those numbers together and then you show that it's going to cover the cost for the other initiatives, pull in people who have actually had that experience, who have proven that, and come and either collect their testimonials, get them to speak at your company, so that your leadership knows it's just not another business case because they get 15 of them, and though we have to provide them, it adds more credibility if other companies are coming forward and saying, hey, look, we put the price initiative in, and then we were able to do these other 3 initiatives without spending additional capital. So I think that's kind of the two-step approach.
Yeah, that credible reference there.
Absolutely.
That can back up the claim, right?
And the more the better.
Yeah, it speaks volumes. Rob?
I agree completely with what Lydia and Mo have shared. I would just add to it because the pricing initiative is going to have the most bang for the buck. There are going to be times where it's not going to be as impactful to the functionality of the business as some other upgrades or emergency changes that need to be made. So my advice is to be persistent. Make sure your story is still carried forward regularly so folks remember the value that you're offering, but also be a great partner and help these other initiatives move along and kind of set the example for the type of partnership that you'd like to receive when you get into your pricing work.
It's great advice. Great advice. Well, let me ask if there's any other advice that any of you would like to share with with those here in the audience, for those that are embarking on a major pricing project of their own. What guidance would you give them? And Rob, let's begin with you.
Don't underestimate the impact of culture on your journey. You're going to see that there are parts of the company that move a little faster than others, but you can't outpace your culture change. So culture change around pricing is essential. I know we've talked about that a lot at MindShare, but it's true. It really does make a huge difference when the culture is moving along with the process changes.
It's great. Lydia?
Stay persistent. Don't take no easily. Keep shining a bright light on it. Keep putting the same metrics in front. I think there's value in repetition. At some point, as a company is bleeding or losing margin, one of the C-levels is going to look at that report that you've been generating and that you have been proactively saying every occasion you get, we could make a change to this. And I would say also parse it out. If you find that you're not getting the response you want, then instead of looking at it from the total picture, take one piece and see what you can control one piece at a time and show the positive movement forward. And I think that gets you a lot of credibility and gains you traction more quickly.
Mo?
I would say crawl, walk before you run. Take it step by step. It's a long marathon, it's not a sprint. Of course, when we showed the business case and there's a lot of value, there is a lot, everybody get excited, let's go and do it all right now and put an army on it. Walk, crawl, walk, and then run. And you will run, you will reach that, but take it step by step.
Yeah, building that solid foundation, right? Not getting ahead of yourself. This has all been great. I'll just open it up. Is there any other words of wisdom or parting comments you'd like to make to our audience today?
I would say keep learning. Pricing is a journey that we will all continue to learn from each other. So keep coming to events like this. Keep joining Barrett's seminars and podcasts, because there is a lot of wisdom, lots of learning that we can all learn from each other.
Thank you, Mo.
When you hit the noise, which you will, anytime you start a project, there's going to be noise, and everybody that's got a problem is going to pile on to your project, right? It's like a sundae, except not as positive. So keep the faith and go back and remember why you were doing this. What is it that you started the project to actually resolve or figure out? And then go back to the people who are trying to pile on and see if you really can, I think to Rob's point earlier, be a good partner and help them in some way, but make sure you get what you intended and what you wrote the ROI on done and accomplished first.
Thank you, Lydia.
Lydia mentioned pain points that you're going to encounter, but I would say keep in mind that your partners are going to encounter their own sources of pain. And be as empathetic as you can along the journey, and just try to keep relating to those folks, acknowledge their pain points, and do whatever you can to help them work through them, and they'll appreciate that, I believe.
Thank you, Rob. We've got a few minutes. Would love to take questions from the audience. Zilliant has a couple of folks with mics who will be mic runners. They're standing on the sides and scanning the audience. If you would like to ask a question of any of our panelists, please stand so that we can see you and bring a mic to you. Would you help us out? Who's got a question?
Thank you. A question for the panel. Do either of you have any experience of trying to get your leadership team to change the structure of the incentive plan? Our incentive plan is not optimal for profit growth, but have you guys ever experienced that in your careers? And what would you recommend?
What is your experience with changing the incentive plan for sales so that it aligns with the goal of profitable growth?
Absolutely, very good question. One way to drive reduction of price erosion is to give the sales rep a way to see what does it mean for them in every quote. So this is when technology now becomes easy, that I can have within my quotation tool a way to put an incentive calculation next to it. So every time they put a 10% or a 20%, they see the calculation on the right side of what does it mean to their own incentive from that deal. And by doing that, by showing the salesperson the real impact, this is when I was able to get the most out of the reduction and reduce and lower the corridors of my pricing approval.
Rob or Lydia, have you also worked on aligning incentives to the pricing?
I have in a couple of different companies, not so much with Don, but the biggest thing is take a look at what the current program is, get your vision of where you think it needs to go, and not just, don't just try to go from A to Z, but there may need to be a series of course corrections to get there. For example, you could have some competing objectives that are presented in the sales comp plan. As you're able to resolve those over time, it will make the transition a little bit easier.
Lydia?
I would say any way that you can tie compensation to the behavior that you want relative to discount containment, you want to do it. I have seen incredible transformation in sales organizations who went from quite literally, I couldn't possibly put in a 10% discount, and this is a true story, to the next morning, a phone call of that 10% is in and that customer is taking it, right? We're all coin operated. Tell us how we're going to be compensated and we will behave accordingly.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Pay for
makes
play.
sense. Yeah. It's a common reality, though, that when the pricing initiative often runs into this obstacle or this speed bump of how do we get sellers to embrace the guidance if their compensation plan inclines them to price in a different way, right? So harmonizing that's pretty important. Who else would like to ask a question of the panel? And thank you, by the way.
Hey, I've got a question. I'm a project manager. I run implementations, and I'm a big believer in the agile methodology of implementing software. Does a pricing transformation, can it take similar strategies as doing small things, seeing if it works, building on top of that, or does it require more of a broader, bigger organizational push, if you will?
Are you speaking to the implementation itself of the software or to the transformation over time?
No, more of the transformation over time, what you mentioned, the culture and how you engage, get sales and marketing and all on the same page. Does that align with a more agile, do little things, see if it works, adjust, or does it take a broader agreed upon strategy?
That's worked for me, actually.
Which one, Rob?
Taking the smaller, making
yes.
the small changes, see what resonates with folks and where they may lack some understanding of what you're trying to do, and then change.
Mo?
Yeah, I can build on that. In every implementation and in every engagement, we recommend agile. We recommend try incremental pieces so that you can see what does it mean and build on top of it, learn from it, and continue to evolve. So the smaller increments in agile process works really well in pricing. And I encourage everybody to use agile in the implementation of your pricing.
One piece that I would add is establish a communication tool of some sort on a consistent basis with your assorted teams and really help them learn to depend on you for that so that they'll get the straight story from you each and every time. And if there's things you can't release, because oftentimes when you're going through transformations, right, you need to clear things with the C-levels before you can actually go ahead and implement them. But help your teams trust you for the information, because otherwise they're going to create it on their own and it's going to be misinformation, and that's when it all falls apart, right? The wheels come off. So establish yourself as the place to come, but do it once, and that way you're not getting 1,000 questions every time you walk down the hallway.
It's good. Let's take another question.
Just a question around any kind of guidance you have. So in our situation, so I guess in similar customer situations, every single price that we quote to a customer, it's its own its own special snowflake, right? So, I'm in the packaging industry, so a customer wants to put some cereal in a box, and every one of those quotes starts with its own bill of materials, its own labor estimate. It's all custom from the ground up. So we're being challenged to come up with market-based pricing, but I have no visibility to what the market looks like. So what's the guidance you give to customers like that, where there isn't really a price out there in the market to try and give some guidance on?
Lydia, I know your background. You ran pricing for a custom manufacturing organization. Maybe you want to take the first shot at that.
So are you able to plot out what your existing customers are purchasing now? Can you get a clear picture to that?
From the transactional side, you have the final SKU, which is specific to the customer, and a price, but all the other kind of attributes underneath that are lost, and there's no difference. So
that was one of the first challenges we had to deal with, the same, which was to bucketize some of the attributes. In other words, even if you can get six base attributes, so what's the overall size, and you can do that by square inches, and then what's the basic material that you're talking about, what kind of plastic, because that'll tell you which kind of resin category you're in. And then what kind of product family is this? Is this a special technology, or is this something that you've had available for the past 10 years? so that you start to really dimension what kind of product you're dealing with. But that was honestly how we dealt with it. And then we went back and we said, okay, where do we want to be with that set of criteria? Which product do we want priced the highest because it brings the most value, it has the most technology? For example, if it's for food, which you brought up, right? So if it was perishable, that had the highest value because the plastic had to have the respiration rates and all of those things. And then you just kind of step through that criteria. But it sounds like honestly, your biggest challenge is going to be to capture that data, because without plotting it, literally, you got a dartboard and darts. And I've been there. I understand the challenge of that. But really, once you can capture the data, making the choice about what buckets to put it in gets really easy.
Thank you.
And Mo, you've, I'm sure, worked with many configured pricing situations. Do you have anything to add about how to handle the multiplicity of configurations, the uniqueness of each configuration, and still pull a useful price signal out of that data?
I agree, yes, and I will build on what Lydia was saying. It's individual attribute, like even if at the end the combination will end up somewhere, but each product has an attribute that generates value, that gets the customer willingness to pay against. So if you can break it down into the individual component, after that, what will be the end price becomes a systemic calculation.
One idea I'll share to pick up on this, we have customers speaking to us often these days for whom they've already captured the attributes and they've been able to assign a discrete value for each of the attributes, and the challenge now is to create a price build method or price build sequence, a technology that says we can start from a reference price, and then if I'm changing the material, I'm performing more cuts, more bends, more folds, putting a different color ink on, etc. They build up to that value-based price once they've done that data work of being able to decompose the attributes and assign a value to them. So I think there's promise that will flow out of collecting that data, as Lydia suggested. Who else would like to ask a question? We can take one more. Who will be the final?
I had a question for Mo, actually. You mentioned walk, crawl, run, which I think is very prudent advice to give in multiple situations. In this particular case with this pricing transformation, and it's difficult, I think, a challenge in a sense for someone like me not to be inclined to run. So my question is, maybe what does that look like? For example, let's hypothetically characterize it this way. I'm about to pitch, the pace and the cadence in which we ought to implement a solution like this. What does walk, crawl, run look like? For example, we are piloting right now. I guess that'd be an example of crawl. But, in terms of time period and, activities, what does that look like for a pricing implementation? It'd be helpful to know. Thank you.
Sure. So what I mean by that, there are fundamentals that we need to have in place. Fundamentals about the data, fundamentals about the data flow and the integrity of the data, fundamentals about the new ways of running the business and how we want to evaluate the future of the business. So doing a pilot is a great way to learn, and like you're still crawling into learning what the market needs. But before rolling this initial solution, understanding where the global template would look like, so that when you build the next market, it gives you already a synergy on how you're rolling this out globally. So trying to get, without slowing the business case, and that's the fine tuning between how fast I can go in that direction, while I'm building a global template structure that will work with the 90% of my clients and my countries, and that's when I run is when I start taking that and distribute it across the globe.
So that hypothetically I'm making. You know, we've been networking here with other people who have implemented the pricing solution transformation, and they refer to it as they went with the big bang. They did the run. And so I'm just trying to get a flavor for what does that look like, and if you're advising against that or not.
So in certain cases,
I'm trying to bookend it, right?
Yeah.
I want to like, here's option A, B, and C for us to implement this thing.
now if we think about the total end-to-end pricing, we have the price list, we have the final end customer price, we have the execution of the price and the whole CPQ side of things, and then we have the billing and the order management and all of that. Now, doing all of that end-to-end is not advisable. So when I say crawl or split it into components, is figure out what will be the critical mass that gives you the initial early benefit that gets the rest of the business to see the value of that initiative so that we can keep funding this because we see the early wins, while not stressing the system too much because we don't want to destroy or slow down the selling of the process while we're transitioning into the new ways of selling. So it could be setting price manager in certain cases as a one big bang, as the early phase, as the crawling. But then adding a CPQ, adding billing, adding is when you're starting crawling. And when you start walking, and when you have the whole global template in place, this is hypothetically could be when I'm starting to run in terms of expansion. Make sense?
Thank you, Paul. It sounds like, Mo, it might be a matter of the zoom level at which you're looking at the picture.
Exactly.
When I heard you describe that end-to-end, unadvisable to take on 5 systems as a single Big Bang project, but when you zoom in and say, I'm going to set my list pricing, or I'm going to get that negotiated pricing right for the special discounts, that may be an activity that in its entirety looks like a big bang because you're doing it,
Yep.
right, as one project. Am I hearing you correctly, Mo?
Absolutely.
Right, appreciate that. And thank you, Paul, for the question.
Yep.
Well, I'd like to thank each of our guests today for being generous with your insights. Mo, Lydia, and Rob, thank you so much. Can we give them a hand, please?